Shop Talk Live, episode number 221. Today I have a treat in store for everyone. I sit down with Gary Rogowski for a one-on-one episode. We were going to do a normal episode with Gary Rogowski, but seemingly everybody is taking their own little version of a pandemic vacation over these 2 weeks. So it was just Gary and I. He blows my mind multiple times and tells probably the best woodworking hand plane story in the history of the world. I want to let everyone know that we have a webinar coming up August 6th at 7 p.m. with Peter Galbert talking about spoke shaves. That's all the selling I really need to do. Peter Galbert talking about and demonstrating spoke shaves. So head on over to findwoodworking.com/shopclass and sign up for our newest shop class webinar. We've been doing a bunch of webinars and they're fun. They're great. You can ask questions and get them answered live. It feels like you are at an event. I've been enjoying them a lot. We've all been having a lot of fun with them and they've been really well received. So if you haven't checked them out, please do. Findwoodworking.com/shopclass, August 6th, 7 p.m. Peter Galbert, spoke shaves. Boom. First off, Gary, you've been staying busy during the whole lockdown.
Busy-ish.
You've been active. You've been
certainly
doing
been
webinars.
Even just walking around worrying, I have been active. I'm active all night long, actually, for that. And then Portland, Portland's kind of a strange place these days.
Yeah. There's some activity, but yeah.
And, the easiest thing to do, being a centrist like I am, is to point my fingers at all of them and say, no. But I think there's plenty of blame to go all around.
So you're doing lots of webinars, though. You've been doing online classes.
Well, we're starting. My bench is a mess right now because I've got hand planes strewn all over it.
Because I'm sure your bench is always super clean.
You've been to my shop before. Wow. Because, it's... No, I say that a messy bench is a sign of a superior intelligence.
I like that.
Yeah, that gets you through a lot of stuff. We started the first week of July. I made a transition. We closed March 15th. We reopened sort of in June and had some classes with protocols in place. Mm-hmm. Distancing, the benches were far enough apart. Doors are open and all that. And the class response has been pretty good, mm-hmm. Not up to our old numbers. So I said, well, let's think about this online stuff. I've been thinking about it for a while and thinking about doing some seminars on setting up shop because I've got a new shop. So the pandemic and the situation just really kickstarted things. And then I had this great student, Rogelio, who had taken a class from me and had all the expertise. Oh my goodness. That makes such a difference.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference. So he takes care of all that. So we've got the Ethernet cable and a new faster upload signal and all that stuff that I know a fair amount about these.
As he holds up a shoulder plane. But where's the Ethernet port on that shoulder plane?
Oh, see, that's the great thing about the Veritas. It's well hidden.
Oh,
you slide this out on the back of the sole, and then there's an Ethernet cable right there.
Listen, if anyone's going to put an Ethernet port on a shoulder plane,
it will be Veritas.
Wally Wilson.
Yeah, Wally.
Well, so is your first online lecture tonight? Unfortunately,
this is our second. We had one July 1st on milling lumber, and this one tonight is on the hand planes you need at the bench.
Will you be doing more for the listening audience?
Yes, we will be doing a hands-on workshop August 7th and 8th on inlay secrets. So, yeah, it'll be a mixture of me chatting for a while, folks working in their shop, and then me chatting again for 3 hours on a Friday night. And then you've got all day Saturday to work, and then 3 hours in the afternoon on Saturday to do some more techniques and answer questions and stuff. So we're trying to highlight stuff.
So it sounds like a fairly interactive way where they go and do the work on their own and come back and say, I was having this problem. I was having
exactly.
Okay.
So I'm trying to figure out the best way to do, the hands-on education, because it's usually in close quarters where you're looking over someone's shoulder going, no, do it this way. And so depending on the numbers, we may have people. So on Zoom, you can have panelists and you can have attendees, and the panelists can talk. If you got 50 attendees, which pretty much what we're averaging, you don't want everyone to be able to talk.
Yeah.
So that's just mayhem. So for our lectures, we're doing Q&A, so people can type in a question, and then then Rogelio will ask me the question, and we move on from there. But the workshop is an experiment, because I'm trying to move my mastery program to a completely online program. So in the past, it was a distance program. Last year I had a guy from Philadelphia and LA and just down the road here in Salem, Oregon, and around the vicinity. But now it seems like we could try and do this more broadly and try and do it online.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, it sounds like you are someone who's not going to sit idle, and you will
got to keep moving
to make it happen. Should we answer some? Let's answer some woodworking questions.
Sure.
From listeners.
Sure.
And so let's see. We've got a few. The first one is from Jonathan. I'm a volunteer at Habitat for Humanity, and at a build a few years ago, there was a big 4.5-foot diameter walnut tree that had to come down. After beating off the people that wanted it for firewood, I got to take it home and have it sawn for lumber. I then stickered and stacked it, put a shed roof over the pile, and waited. It's now 3 years later, and I'm ready to put it to use and build some shelves for my house. The lumber's got a moisture content of 11%, according to my moisture meter, and seems to be stable at that point. My house is heated and air conditioned, so I would expect that the eventual moisture content of the shelves would wind up around 7 to 8%. I've heard recommendations to bring wood into the house for a while to let it equilibrate, but that's impractical considering the number of board feet involved. My shop is not climate controlled. Short of building a kiln, how do I deal with this? Are proper construction techniques sufficient to deal with wood movement? So there's a lot here.
Yeah, there's a couple of issues to deal with. Number one, I think, is why are you using walnut for shelves, man? Why not build a whole cabinet? But
I think it was built-ins, and I might have shortened it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, years ago, I was driving my sweetie to the airport. This was early 80s, maybe even 70s. And we would take this road. The freeway wasn't in place, and that's how long ago it was. And they had cut down this walnut tree on this street corner. I knew it was going to be a development. I just knew it was a development. It was going to be a 7-Eleven, one of those strip mall developments. I couldn't bear it. So I liberated the walnut that was there on the ground and did not get cut up for firewood. Unfortunately, the wood was mostly junk. It was full of knots. And, I mean, there's always that issue.
Urban trees are difficult.
They're not well cared for. But if the wood is good, I don't think you have any problems at 11%. This fellow is in North Carolina.
West Virginia, I believe.
West Virginia, from my point of view, it might as well be the same place. I'm joking. It's like I'm from New York City. Everything outside of Brooklyn is west. It's moist there in the summertime, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really moist there in the summertime. So
yeah, it's definitely a humid environment.
And then in the wintertime, things completely reverse. So a 4% moisture swing, I think, is going to be pretty normal for the area. So this is what I would do. Number one, I would take an offcut, the widest you've got, measure it, put it inside for a couple of weeks. Check the moisture content in the shop first, then put it in the house. And after a couple of weeks, check the moisture content there. I mean, if there's a giant swing, then I'd be a little concerned about it. But I don't think there's going to be a giant swing. I think it's going to be us.
So a 4% swing, you're okay with?
That happens every year back east.
Yeah.
Every year, maybe 6%.
Yeah.
So
I mean, one of my arguments is that back in the 18th century, they didn't have kilns. All of the lumber was air dried.
Right, but they didn't have AC
But those pieces are now in air conditioned homes. Right. So is construction techniques what has kept those alive?
Yes. Here's something to consider. Think about this. You take a front door to a house, and it's got a bottom rail on it that's maybe 10, 12 inches wide. Mm-hmm. That happens out here all the time, old houses, 10, 12 inch wide, CVG fir, usually, bottom rail to the door. And the outside is exposed to the air, and the inside is heated and cooled all year round. How in the world does that survive?
That's interesting.
How does it survive? It boggles the mind, and yet it does. I think it does because it's vertical grain, it is rift sawn, or quarter sawn, and that cuts down on the movement issues. Mm-hmm. And I think if you do pay attention, so you're putting shelves into a cabinet and everything is moving in the same direction, there's no need to worry. Here's the thing. There's two things that we can agree on, us woodworkers. Mm-hmm. Wood moves, okay? So if you pay attention to that, you're not going to have problems with things splitting. So if your cabinet is built with the grain running all the way around it and your shelves are put in, so the shrinkage direction is the same as the cabinet, everything will be fine.
Okay, so if he's building the sides of a bookcase with the grain running like you would a side of a bookcase, and you do the shelves the same way, they should be moving in unison. They
will be moving in unison. No question about it.
If for some reason you're not, does he need to be thinking about leaving the back of a mortise and tenon unglued or something? Or I mean, so what are some more techniques that you can rely on to keep things from?
Let's say he built a frame and panel cabinet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For some reason, or he's attaching the shelves to something that's not going to move.
Yeah.
Then what you do is either have some sort of frame to sit your shelf on, or glue in the front 2 or 3 inches.
Okay, and
then let the back end do its movement. But you have the front locked in, so you have that nice clean edge along the front, and then the back can move.
Yeah,
in and out. And back east, it's going to move in and out, and depending on where they are, whether they're in the valley or on top of a hill, and really that does make a difference. There are microclimates. Mm-hmm. And I built a 3-drawer case once, a jewelry case, for a client one time, and it worked just fine in my shop. And she took it to her bedroom, stuck it in the corner where it was really damp, and it's swole right up. So this stuff happens.
So I want to touch on something that you mentioned, and the idea of taking an offcut and bringing it into the house.
Yeah.
And using that as a sample or a relative moisture content.
Just an experiment.
Yeah. Is that something you do commonly? Or?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I just check moisture content. I don't worry about it going to someone's house. Here in the Pacific Northwest, this is our dry period. Summertime is our dry period. And so humidity is down around 25, 30%.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, it's nice. You grow up in the Midwest, you grow up back east, humidity is what? On a good day, 80%?
Yeah.
On a good day, 80%. Yeah. That's brutal. So yeah, the movement issues are far less across the year. I used to send a piece down to my folks in Arizona. Everything changes because the moisture, the humidity is 4%. So yeah, you've got to pay attention to how you put things together. You have to pay attention to wood movement.
So you're sending a piece to Arizona. Let's say you're sending a jewelry box to Arizona.
Right.
What are I would assume you are leaving tighter gaps because it's going to shrink when it gets there on drawers, or what? Are you trying to predict the movement?
I'm sorry. Tighter gaps is an oxymoron, like giant trim. I want the giant trim. What?
You got me on that one.
All my gaps are tight. Okay?
Noted.
I sent a jewelry box down there and had a frame and panel lid.
Okay. And
I pre-finished the panel, but it glued to the frame when I glued it up. And by golly, it blew that frame apart. When it shrunk up, it just blew it apart. I sent another piece down there, another frame and panel lid, and it's doing just fine. So you just have to pay attention to that stuff. Put enough finish on panels so they're free to expand and contract. Everything else, I'd be cautious, but everything else, you just have to go with really tight joints.
Okay.
And, hope for the best.
All right.
There's two things. Arizona is, the places in the Southwest, Vegas, California, can be really tough on furniture. Easier to build there and send it to a wetter climate. Then you just have to worry about it exploding, but
and drawers not opening,
it's like that. But yeah, pay attention to movement issues. So when I did this online lecture on milling lumber, one of the things I talked about was Bruce Hoadley's book, The Bible of Wood Technology. And in it, he talks about building with shrinkage in mind, particularly for the Northeast, and how much he needs to leave for a drawer, how big a gap he needs to have for an 8-inch tall drawer over the year. Mm-hmm. And here I leave a gap of about 3/30 seconds, just over 1/16 of an inch. And he leaves 1/8 of an inch plus. Mm-hmm. So, you have to think about where you are and how much the movement issues are. Yeah. Years ago, Garrett Hack wrote an article for the magazine, and he said, I take a 12-inch wide piece of cherry and I measure it in the summertime and then I measure it in the wintertime. And I said, that's a good idea. I don't get 12-inch wide cherry. So that's
okay. I'll send you some.
No, thank you. You and Bexford. Yeah.
The only person who I've actually seen, I think Kevin Rodell one time pulled out a piece of, Jeff, was it oak or whatever? But he had a board that he had been measuring for years. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I need to do this now when I'm young, and one day it can be, a record of my life. But
the thing is, and I don't quite understand this from a technology, wood technology standpoint. Wood at some points, maybe after 100 years, says, that's it, I'm done. And it just starts to decompose. Which is why, in the scheme of things, woodworking is valued so low. So if you go to a museum, mm-hmm. furniture is not on the first floor. Yep. It's not on the second floor. It's way back.
It might be in a corner holding a placard for the painting on the wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Armor has got a better. I'm thinking about the Metropolitan Museum in New York. If you want to hide from the guards, though, the furniture lockers are a good place. They still catch it, but because wood doesn't survive after several hundred years, usually. We're not prized as highly. So wood's at a certain point, I don't know about Kevin's piece of oak, but at a certain point, it's going to go away. So, but most of the time, you and the furniture mover, oh, great, are the two biggest issues. Please shut off your truck.
You got a neighbor?
I got a neighbor who's got it. I shut it off. Excellent. Got the roll-up door. It was hot in here today, so we got the roll.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. This next question is from Scott, and I have been holding this question, I think, specifically for you for quite a while.
Oh.
Just so that you know, I will get a question into the podcast mailbox, and I'll say, Gary Rogowski should answer this, and it goes in a folder. And then when we finally make this happen, that's when these come out. Okay. So, from Scott, I have been practicing joinery on pine and poplar for a little over a year, probably at this point 2 years, just about every day. I'm still struggling to get things perfect, and I feel as though I mess with it too much and always seem to keep moving my scribe line back. How much of making precise cuts and chiseling is muscle memory versus natural talent?
I remember seeing this question.
Yeah. Also,
actually, I know Scott, and basically it's him. He's got two left hands, and it's terrible. It's a real burden for a woodworker to have two thumbs pointing the same way. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You remember Best in Show where he's got two left feet? The movie Best in Show? He's got two left feet. So, no, it's not talent. I don't think it's talent. I think, there are some woodworkers in the world like Phil Lowe, who at birth, had a chisel in his hand. He came out of his mom's womb. He had a chisel.
Came out with a 1-inch Buck Brothers.
He said, "Where's some wood? I'm here." I mean, the guy's amazing. He was a woodworking savant from a very early age. But the rest of us learn. So I think it's possible to learn. I think there are techniques that will help. And one of them is understanding the importance and the use of the most basic machine in the shop. There are 5 basic machines? But the one we use most in the shop is the wedge. That's it. Every machine we have in the shop is a wedge. Oh, yeah, you give me that look. But think about it. Every saw that we use has a wedge shape. Every saw tooth is wedge shaped.
Yeah.
Our chisels are wedge shaped. Our plane irons have a bevel. Sandpaper is a series of wedge shaped grit.
Okay, you were stretching this one now.
Oh, I'm not. They're wedge shaped. Files are wedge shaped. Drill bits. There is nothing except, I'll show you one. This hammer. That's not a wedge.
Well, it's got a wedge holding the head on.
There is one.
So there's that.
Everything else is a wedge. And so once you understand how a wedge works, so number one, for tool steel, it has to be somewhere between a 25 and a 30, 35 degree angle, depending on what you're cutting. Okay. Lower angle for softer woods. So that will help in pine and poplar. Scott's tools have to be super sharp.
Yeah.
For pine. If they're not sharp, he's going to have nothing but trouble, and he's going to break through his cuts rather than cut.
Okay, so let's hit on that a little bit more in depth, because that's something I think gets glossed over sometimes, is that pine and poplar break before they cut most of the time, unless you're super, super sharp. So can you why is that? Is it just a matter of, or I'm sorry, what I should be asking is pine and poplar the best wood for him to be practicing with if he's building skills?
Well,
because you have to be so sharp.
I think they're great. I think they're great practice materials. I also think that if he picks up a piece of cherry sometime, he's going to be really surprised at the difference in how the wood cuts.
Yeah.
Or if he tries beech, oh my goodness, there's a world of difference.
Okay.
But learning how to sharpen is important for your joinery. If you're hand cutting your joints, having sharp irons makes all the difference in the world. But as I say, you can have a lower angle in pine because it'll hold up in a softwood like pine, except for southern yellow pine, which will eat a chisel edge like Doritos. I mean, it just crunches an edge up. It's brutal. Roy Underhill came out here one time to teach a class, and they built foot treadle lathe, all in southern yellow pine. And I went to the lumberyard and found, for some reason, 2x12 planks of this stuff, 10 feet long, and decided to just buy all of it out of the yard. And my truck looked like this. And the guys in the yard were like, "You think you're sure you're going to make it home?" I go, "Yeah, I'll be fine." What are shock absorbers anyway? So, but it just brutalized our tools. It's so hard. So softwood designation doesn't necessarily mean soft.
Yeah.
But
do you, okay, so you're on some weird island and you only have
I'm always on a weird island.
Rogowskiville. You only have Eastern white pine.
Lucky me.
Yeah, this is a great place, right? Are you sharpening your chisels at a 25-degree bevel as opposed to a 30?
Yeah. What I do as a general rule, since I really like using white oak, and I like using walnut, and I like using hemlock.
Okay.
Love hemlock now.
I know nothing of it.
It's another forest tree out west here, but instead of fir, which is great if it's really tight grain, hemlock's a little easier to cut.
Okay.
Yes, for Eastern white pine, I keep it at a 25-degree angle. I keep my edges at 27 degrees, so I don't go way high and I don't go way low. So as I said, I'm a centrist.
I've never heard somebody say 27. Wow.
Yeah, so I keep it at 27. For all my chisels, I put a micro bevel on them, just a couple of swipes back on the last stone to give me another 5 degrees. So I'm probably chopping at a 32-degree angle right at the tip. That will still do fine if the edge is sharp enough.
Okay.
It'd be just fine. And I think pine and poplar are great for practicing. But at some point, you want to move on and see the difference. But here's the thing. Scott's talking about moving the scribe line back. It sounds like what's happening is that when he's chopping, he's trying to take too much material off, and he's on the gauge line. So say you're cutting some dovetails.
For our listening audience,
I've just pulled out some dovetails. And you've got this gauge line right here. Well, you don't start you've maybe used a coping saw or something to get rid of some of the waste, but you don't set it right on the gauge line then to get rid of the remaining 1/4 of an inch. You start right on the very edge of the waste and take maybe a 32nd of an inch pass and chop that away. And because of the wedging action of the chisel, it blows it away.
And here we are back to the wedge.
Yes. And understanding how the wedge will work to your advantage makes all the difference. I used to cut dovetails like Scott did. I'd set my chisel right on the gauge line and take a really light chopping pass and then clean up the waste because I knew I got a wedge shape.
Yeah.
And it's going to move into the good wood if I hit it too hard. Well, after a while, I finally woke up and went, forget all that. Just move out to the outside. You can whack on it, bang on that wood. It doesn't matter if it blows out, and move your way back to the gauge line so that when you finally set the chisel on the gauge line, it's one stroke and you're taking away, again, a fat 32nd of an inch of material, and it blows it right away. Doesn't matter if it's pine or poplar or beech. As long as you've got a small enough chunk left for your wedge to push it away. I mean...
So you are, though, a huge proponent of practicing sawing techniques and
Oh, God.
like this is part of your ethos as a woodworking teacher, right? Is that you have dedicated exercises, if you will, right?
Right. Yeah, we do this exercise called the 5-minute dovetail.
Yeah.
And people try it, and the box of scrap that we use, it says 5-minute dovetail on it, and someone put a 0 behind the 5. That's just wrong. But what I tell folks is, if you want to get good at cutting dovetails, just practice your sawing. Take a piece of pine, put a gauge line on it, one side only, and practice your sawing. And just practice your sawing. If you can saw straight, boy, that makes a big difference in your woodworking life.
Yeah.
Maybe your entire life. I don't know.
So when do you have your students move on to actual, all right, you don't need to practice this anymore. You're ready for a piece of cherry.
Right.
What,
Yeah.
like, is there a time when it's like, all right, stop doing these dovetail exercises?
Well, you do a 5-minute dovetail every morning. That's what you should do. Every morning.
You?
No, because I've done thousands of them.
Okay, so
I should. And the reason is this. I developed this exercise years ago to teach people how to cut dovetails, because the tail, what's the tail? What's the pin? And you look at one and it looks like a finger joint, and you look at,
yeah.
it's confusing.
It is.
So I said, well, I'll just do this simple little exercise and everyone will figure out this is a tail and this is the pin. And then I realized that it was giving me all this information about the student, how they handled the saw, how they handled the chisel, how they handled success and failure. And they're not precious. These dovetails are not precious. So you can throw them away at the end.
Yeah.
I've kept a lot of them, and I'm going to do something with them. And then, I don't know, have a giant bonfire that Elon Musk can look at from up in space. But what I've also learned is that I mark out my 5-minute dovetails with a sharp pencil. And at this point in time, I don't use a marking knife to mark out my dovetails. I use a sharp pencil.
Really?
I use an architect's lead holder, and I can saw to a line, and that's just practice.
Okay.
But I think the other value of the exercise is to get your head and your focus tighter. You walk in from outside, and there's a lot of stuff going on around you, and now you're at the bench looking at a saw cut that you have to make. That's really different.
Yeah.
And the 5-minute dovetail and other exercises like that, just to sort of warm up, because woodworkers are notorious for walking down into the basement shop or going out to the garage, grabbing their project and screwing it up. I've done it many times. And it's so easy just to go there and practice a little bit. Baseball players practice, musicians warm up, woodworkers don't seem to warm up. So something at the bench just to get your focus tighter and warmed up. The muscle memory will kick in after a saw cut or two. I find that if I haven't cut dovetails in a while and I'm building a box, the first one's not that good. Second one's better, third one's better. Fourth one depends on my attention. It could go up or down.
So with that said, the great Gary Rogowski is building a commission.
Yeah.
Do you do some sawing practice or something before you saw the dovetails for the drawer or the carcass, or are you just sawing the back of the drawer?
Oh, no, heck yeah.
It doesn't matter.
No, I do some practice, sure.
Oh.
Sure.
See,
absolutely.
even Gary Rogowski practices people.
There's a story about Frank Klaus at one of the shows. You know, Frank does this dovetail joint where he saws and then he saws to the side and then bang, it goes together. And he was at a show and he was warming up beforehand. He said, well, yeah, you gotta, you have to, everyone does.
Yeah.
But that is a part of the muscle memory, is understanding, okay, this is how I stand. This is how I hold myself. Yeah. And the more you practice that, the easier it is to remember and get back in the groove. So,
cool. All right. Well, So we always do a segment, and I didn't prepare you for this because I didn't want you to think about it too much.
Okay.
But we always do a segment. It's always like all-time favorite tool of all time for this week, or all-time favorite technique of all time for this week, or whatever. And when I was thinking about this, this is what I was like, this is what I want to hear out of Gary. Tell me a story about a hand plane.
Well, I've got a lot of stories about it.
I know, but you've probably got like, I bought this hand plane off of an old man in a forest. And like, what's the best backstory for a hand plane that you have?
Wow. I've got them spread out all over my bench. That's true. Well, I think it's still this. Let me grab them. When I found a hand plane outside this house I was living at in Portland.
See, I knew it was going to be like this.
Yeah, well, it was an old house. There were about 5 of us living there. A band was practiced there in the basement. No, in the main room. I slept in the main room, but
this sounds like an ideal living situation.
It was
I'm sure
really
your parents were super stoked about this.
They didn't know about this. This was after college. Billy was there, and Claudia was there, and there was this giant blackberry patch that we sort of carved out this area. I remember walking through the blackberry patch one night, and I walked in at the same time this possum walked in, and we both went, whoa! Because they're ugly. And we both split. But I was walking around the house one time, just this, I don't know what I was doing, just exploring. And in the bushes, in the blackberry bushes, or this right near the house, I found this hand plane. And I went, this is a hand plane. I recognize this as a hand plane. I don't really know what it does. I still have it. Where is it?
I swear to God, I didn't know that this was going to be this good.
Yeah. I found this hand plane on the ground, and I said, this does something, and I don't know what it does. So I gave it to Claudia to hold on to it for me, because I was headed back east to visit some friends, and went through Missoula and saw my physicist buddy, the rocket scientist up in Missoula, and then down into Chicago where I grew up, and then to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where Chris was playing in a band called Radio King and his Rhythm Masters. And Chris played bass for them, and I hung out there. My Volkswagen broke down, and became a Volkswagen mechanic. I lived through a Michigan winter. That was enough to convince me to go back to the West Coast, because I'd grown up in Midwest winters. And I went back, and I went to Claudia, and she still had this hand plane. And it has a 76 on it and a bell. This is what's called a transition hand plane.
Yeah.
So it's a wood body. There's a lever to adjust the blade up and down.
It's wood body with a metal frog, right? And like,
yeah, it does have a metal frog that's screwed on. Replacement screws, they're bright and shiny. Everything else is original. And I've never got it to work. I've never sharpened it, but it became sort of a symbol of this other world that I was interested in exploring, because I was going to go get a degree in literature and go teach somewhere at a college. And I skidded off that path, and but I carried this hand plane with me. So yeah, that's probably my best.
If I had enough time, I'd write a bluegrass song about that.
Yeah. On the hand plane. Yeah. Well, we have, I did just a very large joke. I played a very large joke. I built a chair that was 3 times life size. Giant chair. And so on YouTube, on our channel, is a video of me and my assistant at the time, Zach, putting this chair together. It's a big job. And we do it, it takes about 15 or 20 minutes. We compress it a little bit. But in the background is John Prine playing Grandpa Was a Carpenter.
Okay. Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's nice. But yeah, it was a symbol of a different world and a different way of being in the world for me.
Yeah.
So 45 years later, here I am.
That's fantastic. All right, well, let's take a quick break. Veritas Tools is the manufacturing arm of Lee Valley. Veritas president Robin Lee says that their aim is to ensure that the tool does not limit the expression of the person who's wielding it. To that end, Veritas takes traditional woodworking tools and makes them better in terms of ergonomics, functionality, or manufacturing materials. Veritas holds over 100 patents, which they see as proof of their innovative approach to getting more out of a tool. You can see what they've got to offer at leevalley.com.
I'm back whenever you're ready.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking about old mic stands. That's where my head is right now. All right.
Well, for those of you in the listening audience, Ben was smoking a doobie then.
Well, I got to thinking about the blackberry patch and Claudia and that old Minnesota winter.
Oh, yeah. Them were the days.
All right. This next question is from Ralph, and I am thoroughly confused by it.
Okay.
Most of the time, I kind of know an answer.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I am.
Great. Right. Okay. Lob it in here.
I recently acquired a Stanley No. 5 from an estate sale. After doing some light cleanup on the plane body, I went to sharpen the blade. After touching up the back, I started on the bevel. When I was done, I reinstalled the blade and took a test cut. The blade only cut on about a 1/16 of an inch on each side of the blade.
Oh.
I pulled the blade back out and checked the cutting edge against the straight edge. Sure enough, from about 1/16 of an inch on each side, the blade wallows out about a 64th of an inch to a 32nd of an inch. I made sure to flatten the stones and the plane and the blade edge, but after I finished once again, it was wallowed out in the middle of the blade. I'm using a Mark II Honing Guide, Norton Waterstones, glass plate with sandpaper to flatten. I haven't had this happen on anything else I've sharpened. Any ideas?
So if I understand correctly, the 1/16 of an inch on each side of the blade is high, and then there's a belly between those two high spots.
This is like he's getting an anti-camber.
Right. And the only thing that makes sense is that his stone isn't flat. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense.
But I trust that his stone is flat. So
right.
Is it just...
If his stone is flat...
and that's a big if, but if his stone is flat.
If his stone is flat, then I would look at where his finger pressure is. So if he's got his hands, if he got his two fingers on that jig, moving it back and forth, and he's only pushing there, or actually it's the reverse. I'm sorry, it's the reverse. If he's only got his two fingers in the middle, and he's only pushing there, he might be wearing that out more than he is on the edges.
And maybe he's used to sharpening thicker blades.
That could be.
And it has never been a problem. Gary, I think you nailed it.
No, well, it might be true, but it's, you can, when I put a camber on a plane iron,
mm-hmm.
I'm usually going side to side with it, not back and forth with it, but side to side. So,
are you freehand sharpening?
Yeah, I freehand.
Uh-huh.
I hollow grind and then I freehand so I can find the angle. But it's pretty easy to do that just by putting my finger pressure at the two corners,
mm-hmm.
and you get that slight camber. So it's surprising how flexible that edge is on a plane iron. And I think that's one of the things that people overlook, and they're into, tight mouth openings and different stuff. But I think that blade flutter is a real issue,
mm-hmm.
because that edge is so very fragile.
Especially old Stanleys are the plane
they're
blades.
so thin.
They're way thinner than what if you've only used a Lee Nielsen or a Veritas or a Wood River, whatever.
Yeah,
there's half the thickness.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes even less.
Yeah.
So I was going to tell you this other plane story. So I got my dad's tools at at a certain point when I decided, okay, I want to learn woodworking, I knew my dad had done some. My dad and I didn't get along all that well. But I knew he had some tools, and my grandfather was a carpenter and had some tools. So I said, can I go and get those tools? And I grabbed this little 103 Stanley block plate, and I tuned it up, and I flattened the bottom, and I sharpened the iron, and it's a really thin piece of steel. And it's hard to sharpen, but it was my dad's plane, and I wanted to make it work. And it's got this terrible adjusting lever that's really hard to move, but it's my dad's plane, and I really wanted to keep it. And, the adjustment to block the blade down wasn't all that good, but it was my dad's hand plane. And then Thomas Lee Nielsen came along with his 102 low angle block plane, and I put my dad's hand plane away, and I never looked back. There's such a difference in the quality of the tool, the thickness of the iron, the way it locks down, the way it adjusts. This is the best hand plane you can buy, this 102. Mm-hmm. That is my opinion. And I've told Thomas this. I said, this is the best hand plane you make. He doesn't agree, but I think it's just remarkable what you can do with that tool. But I think it has a lot to do with, as you say, the thickness of the iron, and then how it's held in place, and eliminating that blade flutter. So with a number 5, you can probably easily go out and get a thicker iron. I have another thought.
Yeah.
Was it Harvey?
Ralph, I'm sorry.
Harvey was my boss pouring concrete. Ralph, there's another thought, and that is that the chip breaker, if it's an old Stanley, might be pushing down more in the middle, and the ends have been broken away, or it's not flat or something. Or vice versa. I keep thinking it's the other way. He's got camber, but he's got hollow. So maybe it's just pushing at the ends and pushing those out just a hair. I don't know.
So maybe he needs to tune up the chip breaker.
The chip breaker as well. Yeah. I think he needs to throw both of those things away and get a hawk iron and chip breaker, and his life will change.
Yeah.
His life will change.
I think it's pretty clear that you've handled a hand plane or two, Gary.
Well, I'm still looking for the USB port on some of them.
They're USB-C now, and you need an adapter.
Oh, God. I can't keep up with you. I can't keep up with USB ports. How am I supposed to keep up with hand plane technology?
Oh, just wait till you get to USB-C. It's just delightful.
Great.
I love it. I have 2 on my computer, and one's broken.
Oh, great.
All right. So let's question number 4. And this one might do it for us. When you do, sorry, from Chris, when do you go buy cheap carbide router bits versus spending the extra money to get high quality carbide bits? The listening audience, Gary is trying not to scream right now. If you know you are going to use them for maybe a handful of times, does that influence your purchase? And I feel like Gary is a man of strong opinions.
No.
And he's about to share.
Let me tell you a story. Years ago, there was a letter to the editor about making a hollow chisel mortiser work properly. And some contributing editor wrote back to him saying, you should take your hollow chisel mortiser and melt it down into a plowshare. Who would say such a thing? Well, I did.
Were you? I was going
to. Worked with me.
Did it get printed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably why I got booted. No, it's not true. It's the issue of router bits is partially economic. I went and toured in Hawaii 20 years ago and gave talks about router joinery when my first book came out years ago. And everyone in the islands or on the islands uses koa because that's what anyone who moves there expects their furniture to be made of is koa. And depending on how close you are to the source on the Big Island, which is where most of it grows, determines whether you use solid wood or some solid wood and some veneer, or just veneer. So the guys on Oahu, just veneer. The guys on the Big Island, solid chunks, bowls, whatever, because they can get it more easily. Koa has a tendency to tear out quite a bit. And so what these guys would do would be to buy high-speed steel bits and use them and throw them away. Because high-speed steel bits, and usually you're buying end mills, are sharper than carbide, but don't last as long. So they would use them, but they're much cheaper. They're a third of the cost. So it's just a question of, how much you're going to be using this stuff. For my money, it's always better to buy a carbide tip bit. I'm not cutting koa or other difficult woods like that. And then you have it. It's a good investment. Tools are an investment. So even a router bit is a good investment.
I'm confused because I don't know if I have known that high-speed steel is
high-speed steel you can make sharper than you can make carbide. It's just a question of how the carbide is bonded together with what's the metal they use in it? Cobalt. And whether there's pools of it and how it gets mixed up and how it gets cooked. And it tends to flake away, whereas a high-speed steel edge tends to round over, just like a chisel edge will round over. And so high-speed steel you can make sharper because you can hone it and get that angle more precise. And so it's sharper, but it burns because crud will get on it. You can make it sharper, they don't last as long. And so the guys that I met over in Hawaii were using high-speed steel bits and just tossing them because they were, $10 a pop and not worth resharpening. The value of a carbide, solid carbide or carbide tip bit is that it's got longevity. You can sharpen it, 3 or 4 or 5 times, depending on the bit, and you've got a good bit. So why not have good stuff that you can rely on rather than crappy stuff that isn't going to give you a very good cut.
So for an OG bit or something that you're probably not going to use.
Yeah, you're not probably, well, you might be able to find a high-speed steel version of it. You might be, but it'll probably be a 1/4-inch shank. And there will be other issues with it that won't make it worth your while to buy. So I would just buy, a good carbide tip bit.
Do you buy any 1/4-inch shank bits?
Not if I can help it.
Why is that?
Not unless, well, because 1/4-inch shank bits don't last as long as 1/2-inch shank bits. They break under a load. And with students, there are loads put on bits. Now, smaller diameter cuts, so if I'm doing inlay, I'll use a 3/16 bit or an 1/8-inch bit. Those are always 1/4-inch shanks. But you get a 1/2-inch bit with a 1/4-inch shank, oh no, not good. I had a student, he wanted a 3-inch cutter and he wanted to use a 1/4-inch shank. Don't do it. It's not good, not healthy. So it's for safety, really, so that and you get less vibration in the cut too.
Yeah. Okay, because the mass of the bit, or is it just the shear strength and all that?
Yeah, it's the shear strength and the flex you get flex in a bit. So if you look at the types of bits that are available, just straight bits. So you just do it straight cut, not the OG, but a straight bit. You can get a single flute, which is a production bit, and it can go really, really quick. But there's only one cutter making a cut every revolution, so it's just going thwap, thwap, thwap. So for 359 degrees of that circle, no part of the bit is contacting the wood. So you tend to get a rougher cut because the bit is vibrating. It's vibrating in the cut, but it goes really fast. So now you put a 2-flute bit in there, and now it's cutting twice with every revolution.
Okay.
That's it. So when it's cutting, it tends to be a little bit more stable. Go to a spiral flute bit, and now your world has changed because there's always cutting edge against the sidewalls of your mortise, and that'll cut down on your vibration a lot. Makes a much smoother cut.
I don't know if I've ever made that correlation between consistent cutting edge in the mortise with a spiral.
Boy, it makes a huge difference.
I always thought it was chip ejection or I don't know, even just the makeup, because you're buying a spiral bit and it's a higher quality bit or something like that. But that makes a lot of sense.
Be careful. So at my old saw shop, which is now a barbecue joint, I said to Randy, Randy, I need a spiral flute bit. And he sold me a spiral flute bit. Did I know that it was a down spiral bit? I did not. So you got to know whether it's an up spiral or a down spiral. It makes a difference.
Yeah.
But I bought a 1/2-inch down spiral bit. So when I cut a mortise, it's packing the chips.
Yep.
Kind of sucks. So know that. But the fact that it's spiral makes a big difference in how it cuts and whether it vibrates or not. Phil, years ago, turned me on to some Freud pattern routing bits that were spiral flute. And you can go against the grain. You can go uphill with them. They're remarkable. They're amazing. So the spiral flute makes a big difference in the quality of the cut. Same with the single flute bit or a cheap double flute bit. You get what you pay for with woodworking tools. You always do. And I found a chamfer bit one time. It was $15, big chamfer bit. It was like a 2-inch diameter chamfer bit. And I got it and I looked at it and I see that the brazing wasn't consistent. There were big gaps between the carbide and the body. And it's like, whoa, I'm not sure I want to turn this bit on.
You don't want that spinning at 20,000 RPMs right in front of your face?
No, and so it was a $15 lesson.
All right.
I was worth it.
So let's hit this last question quickly.
Okay.
This last question is from Joe. When do tables, chairs, and I should have reworded this, but I'm going to go with it. When do tables, chairs, and stools that I build rock? Or why do tables, chairs, and stools that I build rock? That's what it should be. I make every effort to lay out my joinery carefully. I always seem to have to level the legs after construction. Do you have any suggestions on how to remedy this?
Oh, yes, I do. Number one, your tables and chairs are not coming out, flat to the floor because you're doing woodworking. Okay? That's number one. It's not because you're a bad person. It's not because of a misspent childhood, although that's possible. In this person's case, it's possible. No, it is because there are so many variables that, a twisted joint, the leg bends when you shape it and you cut material away that the other legs don't. We're knucklehead designers because we're still doing this Euclidean rectangular stuff. We should only build 3-legged pieces and we'd never have a problem. But no, we're building 4-legged pieces. Problems, immediate. It's not you. It's just the nature of the beast. Here's the things you have to pay attention to. Build in sections and then make sure those legs stay the same length. So if you build a leg and apron table, make sure the apron's a little bit higher than the legs and trim the apron so that your leg are exactly the same length. And then you put one set of leg and apron together with another set of legs and apron to do your whole table build. If you have a table saw, you can use that to trim the bottoms of your legs. Set it for no, I'm not going to even make a joke here. Set it for a really, really fine cut. I've got a video on this. Set it for a really fine cut, maybe a 32nd of an inch, and use a flat grind blade. Use that, figure out. Now, you've got to understand what material and from where it needs to come from. So it's rocking. So if it's rocking on those 2 legs, you don't touch the 2 legs that are...
They're already too short.
They're already too short. So you pick one of the other two and you go over to the table saw. You need a nice flat surface. Or if you don't have that, you could put an auxiliary sheet. I'm thinking about a job site saw. You can put an auxiliary sheet down, level it, true it, and then raise the blade up through it. So it's only a 32nd of an inch. And you just kind of mow that leg bottom over the blade. And it works like a champ.
Okay.
It works like a champ.
Well, we'll have to post a link to that video.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's just are you surprised if you build something and there is no truing to a leg?
Oh,
okay. That's go buy a lotto ticket day.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You always, some amount. And if you look at it at the bottom of the legs carefully, it may be that they're all touchy, but they're not consistent. It's difficult to do. There's too many variables. So here's the one thing I've learned. I've been at this now since 1974. Square is overrated. Perfect is way overrated. And most things can be fixed. Most things can be fixed after the fact. So quit beating yourself up. I used to spend hours trying to get my joiner fence square. And there was a wow in the cast iron. It took me years to realize that. Now I barely square my fence on the joiner. I do sometimes when I'm doing millwork. But when I'm doing edge laminations, I'm just putting opposite faces to the fence so that when I put them together, whether the fence is 89 degrees or 90 degrees, I've got a supplementary angle. I can fix so much stuff with the hand plane after the fact. You see people build a cabinet and they stick a square in there and I go, why are you doing that? It's depressing. It's depressing to stick a square inside your cabinet because it's never square. And there's a clamping pressure. There's the fact that it's usually not square. Who cares? Build a door out of square.
Yeah. Make it fit.
Make it fit.
Yeah.
You've got a new set of problems. They're not hard to manage. I'm not talking about being super sloppy and having, big gaps in my tight joints. But I'm saying that a lot of stuff can be fixed after the fact. And truing the bottoms of the legs, that's one of them.
All right. So Gary, where can people find you and more info? You're on Instagram at Northwest Woodworking.
Right. I'm on Twitter at Gary Rogowski. Northwestwoodworking.com is our website.
Twitter's still a thing?
A website?
No, Twitter. I didn't know woodworkers were still on Twitter.
I'm there.
Okay, sorry.
I'm on Facebook too. I don't like Facebook too much, but I've got a page.
It's a necessary evil, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But northwestwoodworking.com is our website. And there you can find both our podcast, which I do every other week, and it's called Splinters. And you can check out our online classes because we're starting to ramp that up.
Well, and also if somebody loves hearing stories of the days of old, where can they get more of that?
Well, the podcast has been running for 3 seasons now.
Well, there's a book too, right?
Oh, there's a book. Yeah, there's a book. Handmade.
Yeah.
Creative Focus in the Age of Distraction. Yep. And I tell the story of the hand plane in that book. And yeah, there's a bunch of stories there.
Okay. Yeah. So if you enjoy the backstory of a woodworking life, check out Gary's book.
And what's most interesting about that process of authoring the book and getting feedback from folks is people writing me and saying, God, I know just exactly what you're talking about. A lot of folks have gone through those same steps in their woodworking life. And it's, I'm just another schmo like everyone else. And you learn some stuff along the way. And it's been good fun.
Right on. Well, and practice your dovetails.
practice your dovetail, practice your sawing, man.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for coming out
Yeah, this was fun. This was fun.
doing this. That's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer on the show, send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. Head on over to northwestwoodworking.com, right?
Right.
Give it again. And if you're watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up button. Do you have a YouTube channel?
Yeah, Northwest Woodworking.
All right. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thank you for listening. Shop Talk Live listeners, take a deeper dive into woodworking topics you love when you join the Fine Woodworking Unlimited community. From in-depth video workshops, projects and plans, tips and techniques, you'll find everything you need to know to master your craft. Try Unlimited now and enjoy a 14-day free trial. Find out more at finewoodworking.com/members.